And
do you want me to go as well?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead, Marty?
Yeah, so my name is Martina. I work as the CTO of Roadie. We in Roadie do hosted and managed Backstage, so we are the cloud version. And Backstage, you probably already know, is this developer portal originally built by Spotify. I worked in Spotify a few years ago for like almost 5 years, and the last year and a half I worked in Spotify in the team that was building what today is Backstage, but it was the internal version of it.
Well, great, everybody, and everybody knows me. I'm Tracy. So I reached out to Martina some time ago because I thought we should be talking to Roadie and building an integration into Roadie. The team has, Martina, the team has started an integration. I don't know what we're doing with it. Brad McCoy he's out of Australia, I think, or New Zealand, has been working on it. So this is not a convenient time for him to meet. But I know that Utkarsh and Steve have taken a look at it, and maybe they can cover what we are doing. But what we would like to do is primarily two things. One is pull in what we call component information from Backstage. That's what a developer would register to Backstage. And then the second one would be to include the Ortelius kind of data gathering from whatever data that there is already in Backstage. So, for example, if they're already doing SBOMs and it's gathering it, we'd want to pull that information over so we can begin versioning it and aggregating it up to the application level. So what we are focused on is creating release candidates in a decoupled environment at a logical application view. So, for example, anything you do would be seen from gathering SBOMs for an application. We can aggregate that. Tracking inventory, we can aggregate that. So that is our focus.
And I don't know if this kind of fits into the where it fits into, but also when somebody goes through and creates a new CI/CD pipeline, we need to have one of the steps, let's say in your Jenkins pipeline, to have the Ortelius CLI step added to that, and so it gets run as part of that. So there's like Tracy said, there's catalog information that we want, but also we want to be able to do be automatically inserted into pipelines as well. So it's kind of like two different tasks that we are looking at on the integration side.
And when you say pipelines, you mean pipelines in GitHub Actions, or is it?
Yeah, any of the pipelines. So when Backstage goes and a developer registers their component or their service, and you go and create their pipeline, whatever pipeline tool, we want to be inserted into that. So if it's a GitHub action, we want to be inserted as a step in the GitHub action at a certain point. If it's a Jenkins file, we want to be inserted there, et cetera, based on the CI/CD pipeline tool.
So Steve or Utkarsh, do either one of you want to kind of walk through what we've already done so Martina gets an idea of where Brad was headed?
I'm going to pass that over to Utkarsh because I think he's been studying the code a little more than I have.
Okay. I'll share my screen. Okay. Okay, so yesterday I was like running this code. So it looks like initial integration, like to generate the code for Backstage integration for Ortelius is already done. So if you run this code using these following commands, we'll be able to see the home page, which is ortelius.backstage.com. For some reason, the authentication.
Is this a Backstage application with the backend and the front end, or is this just the plugin that you have here?
Yeah, this is with the front end and back end both.
Okay.
Yes. So yeah, for some reason the authentication with GitHub is not working. So that I need to figure it out why that is not working. But I see the packaging is also done. So as you can see, the GitHub action files is being created for the workflows. So creating a build and creating the chart and pushing the chart in, on Google Cloud is everything is done. So even if you deploy this chart from this directory, this will be this will create that instance for you. And here we can see the packages that are created as part of Artifact.
Okay.
But yeah, as Tracy was saying, we need to figure it out, figure out a mechanism which we can, code into this code to generate, to have a tracking mechanism for each component in a microservice that can be onboarded into a Backstage individually.
So is there a front end, or I don't know if it even is a front end hook, but is there a hook that we can utilize that will allow us to know when something's been registered with Backstage?
Yeah, so that we need to do. Whatever code we have, this is just the interface.
Right.
Here we have example. If we run this code, we can see example, but we need to onboard the functionality from Ortelius. And yeah, so this is like purely independent instance of Backstage that is only for Ortelius. So we are deploying ortelius.backstage.com, but regarding the configuration, we need to configure this so that we can configure in our ways, right?
So it's just like a vanilla install, really. Still needs. It's just the scaffolding, really, right?
Correct,
like the skeletal structure still needs further configuration to. Okay.
So Martina, is there a way for us to know if somebody's registered a new project to Backstage?
In which context do you mean that you have a Backstage instance, or you mean from the code, like if you had a plugin and you wanted to get that notification?
Yes, right, from a plugin standpoint.
Okay, so let's say there is a company that is a customer and they are running Backstage, but they run it themselves and they are using also Ortelius, and you want to know when someone has registered a new component.
Correct, so that we can bring it over.
I think there is a very recent pull request merged that handles events. And maybe that's the start of this, because I think you could get into that eventing system for Backstage, and you probably have to write some custom components in the backend that takes that event and sends it to whatever hook you have in Ortelius. Okay.
So is there is it implemented like a webhook where we'd register a webhook, or do we have to actually go into the code and
yeah, you need to go into the code.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you would need to look into the eventing API.
Okay.
And then see how to add, like you probably need a plugin in the backend or something that customers can install. And that plugin would try to listen to events and then send other events to your hooks in Ortelius.
Okay, so it'll still be a plugin and implementation that will work from.
Yeah.
Okay.
There are two kinds of plugins. There are plugins in the backend and plugins in the front end. The front end ones are typically aggregators of information from third-party services. For example, the CI/CD tab that you can see in Backstage has several plugins. One works with Circle CI and another one with GitHub Actions. All of those are front-end based plugins.
Okay, that's good to know because I thought there was only the back-end plugins. Okay, so we will investigate the front-end plugins for that piece of it. Perfect. And
Yeah,
you
so
said
if you want to display data,
which
if
ones
you
were
want
the example?
here, for example, you can take Circle CI, should be one.
So Circle CI has a front-end plugin.
Bugsnag is another front-end only plugin. You have
What
it
was-
like right at the bottom, Bugsnag.
Oh,
In
okay.
the bottom,
Yeah, I see it.
yeah. And we have a lot of front-end only plugins in our repository, and they are also categorized by folder. I think there's one folder for front-end plugins and another folder called backend for backend plugins. So you can see examples of both types.
Okay, perfect. And then that will allow us to capture that information. And does a front-end plugin have to like, for example, you talked like about the GitHub front-end plugin. Does it have to render anything, or can that front-end plugin just listen for the events?
I think you will need a backend plugin for that because the event API is probably available in the backend. So
Okay,
it should be deployed with the backend container.
okay,
So whenever someone wants to use this, they should install both of the plugins.
okay. Now on the installation part, is it would we do a single install of both plugins, or would you recommend doing 2 installs, one for the front end, one for the back end?
Yeah, I think you don't need to do anything. What will happen is that someone who is running Backstage, they can decide how to build their own backend and their own frontend, and they choose what plugins they want to use. So at some point they will want to use Ortelius, and they know that there is a plugin for it. So they will have to code that into their Backstage app and Backstage backend.
Okay,
And it's usually, so if you go into the marketplace before, like that tab, and you go into Bugsnag, for example, the one below, just a little bit below that one, and you go to Explore, bottom right on that card. Yeah,
yeah, that's
that
the right one.
That's all right.
Or Build Guide, doesn't matter, but you see the Explore button.
Mhm.
This is what Backstage integrators look at when they want to include another plugin from somewhere else. And then in this README, you would have some instructions, and the Backstage integrators will have to follow these instructions, add a few lines of code, and they should get up and running with your plugin.
Okay, yeah, I saw that in our repo, some of these files, like the entity service page and stuff like that. Okay. Perfect. Okay, it's starting to all pull together now. Yeah, so if you go into, I think it was in packages.
Mm,
There's a specific language you have to use for writing plugins.
Yes, they have to be in TypeScript.
In TypeScript. Okay. I didn't know that. Thanks.
Yeah, so plugins are basically NPM modules.
Oh, nice. Okay. Just use a package manager to install. Cool.
I saw it
Okay.
somewhere. We don't have to worry about hunting it down
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
I think this one after.
Yeah.
Yeah, here we have integration with GitHub.
Yeah, so this is only the configuration file. So on one hand, you need to include this npm package that you want to add, code a few lines in React so that it says, well, when you go to the entity page and you go to this tab, then I want you to show Ortelius widget. And then you probably have some configuration, you probably have some credentials that they need to add as well. And that will go into this file.
Right, perfect.
But that's for, again, for the Backstage integrators.
Okay.
Okay, that gives us some definite direction on where we need to head. And is there anything different when a end user is using Roadie, which is the hosted version? How's that different implementation wise versus an on-prem version?
The difference, there's no difference really. So we have our own way to include new plugins depending on whether they are open source. If they are open source, normally there's a customer that says, I want to use this Backsnap plugin or whatever. And then we follow the steps that we saw before in the README, and we code those changes in, and then we release it to all the customers. When it's a custom plugin, then it's different because that's when a customer can create a plugin that they keep the intellectual property for, and we cannot share between customers. So that's another story. But in general, we just follow the same steps and we include it in Roadie.
Got it. All right. Any other questions, everybody?
Since it's all dependent on the consumer, so I believe Ortelius has to be in the marketplace for Backstage, right?
Yeah, it
So
should.
that consumer
Otherwise,
can choose. Yeah.
Yeah.
And is that process, how do we get into the marketplace then? Is that just like a normal PR process?
Yeah, exactly. It should be very easy.
Okay. All right. I assume so. That's the way a lot of other companies we've worked with do it that way. Okay, perfect. All right, that helps me a lot. So we know the direction we need to head. Any other questions, Utkarsh, from your side?
Like, what all authentication mechanism we can use for Backstage? Like GitHub is one. Can
Do
we
you
use
have,
like
what do you need the authentication for?
let's
You mean
suppose
to run it
consumer
yourselves or to?
will there be like some sort of single sign-on available? So let's suppose consumer is using Backstage, right? And he has already authenticated Backstage. So if he wants to use Ortelius, so is there a mechanism for single sign-on that we can, pass on to Ortelius?
In other words, does the end user sign into Backstage once, or do they have to sign into every plugin that they're going to use?
Okay, how do you use Ortelius today?
It's just basic auth is what we do our authentication through. So they have a user ID and password basically that they use basic auth on our side. So if we need to change that to do like a token based authentication, so on the Backstage side, they would generate an API token that we give Backstage. We could do that instead of using user ID password.
I think the basic auth should work as well. There are two ways to handle this. There is one which is the proxies in Backstage. That's a package, I want to say. And what it means is that the backend of Backstage can keep routes where it says whenever there is a request to mybackstage.com/ proxy slash Ortelius, I will redirect that to the Ortelius host, and I will add also the authentication. So the backend keeps a copy of the secrets, and whenever any user goes to Backstage, they will share the same authentication credentials because they are kept in the backend. That's one way. The other way is to embed that into the backend plugin that you create. So if the authentication mechanism was not supported by this proxy, then you would need to create your own in the backend and proxy the requests from the Backstage frontend to the Backstage backend, and then to Ortelius, whatever host it is.
Okay, so it goes from the Backstage front end to the Backstage back end, and then over to Ortelius. Is that
Exactly.
right?
Yeah. And in the backend, you have two options. See if it works with the normal creating a proxy route or through your own plugin.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, Ukarsh, what we may want to do is just to get started, we could hard code an authentication just to get started and get everything kind of plumbed together. And then from there, swap out with a different authentication once we get the front end and back end and pieces in place, and then do the proxy path.
The proxy should be quite easy to configure.
Okay.
I'm just trying to find it.
And which proxy are you talking about? The proxy with the back end proxy from Backstage?
Yeah. So
Your
I'm gonna
default
just
one?
link it. Yeah, exactly, because they already implemented a bunch of authentication mechanisms.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of changing the configuration file, the app-config.yaml. And there you can say, I want a new proxy for Ortelius. This route should point to this other host name, and it should use the environment variables, this and that, for the credentials.
Okay.
And that's linking to this documentation page, which is probably better.
Oh, okay. Let me grab that one. Oh, okay. That makes more sense. Yeah, definitely a lot easier to read. All right, perfect. Any other questions, Ukarsh?
No.
Sasha, do you have anything? Sergio?
Oh, all good. Thanks.
All good, friend.
Tracy? Tracy's been very quiet.
No, I'm good. Well, this was a call for you guys.
Yep. Yep. This definitely gives us some direction ahead. So thank you so much, Martina, for taking the time today to help get us on the right path here.
No problem. I
Martina.
am going to link another. This is the repository that we use for our plugins. We created like 10 or 12 plugins. So there are plenty of examples there that you can just copy and use for inspiration.
Thanks. That will be
That's
helpful.
awesome. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
you're
going to be
welcome.
great.
Okay, perfect. All right, perfect. Yeah, front end, back end. That's what we need. Okay, that will. Where are you located?
I'm right now in Madrid.
Okay, because I may have Brad McCoy, who's in Australia, reach out to you if we run into anything. Or do you have another? How should we communicate if we run into any issues or need help?
I think Discord, there is great support in Discord for both Backstage and Roadie. So in
Okay.
any of those, I think should be good.
Okay.
And if you want technical help, like I don't code that much anymore, to be honest. I'm not great in that department anymore, but there are a lot of people that have created plugins in both Discord workspaces.
Okay. All right. And where can we find your Discord server? Is that off your website?
Good question. Let me see if I have that window.
Because we use Discord for Ortelius, that's why I was just,
Yeah, I think I can just probably link it. Okay, this is the invite.
perfect.
And the Backstage one you have already.
All right, so I am. All right, perfect. That was the invite I was looking for. Thank you.
I'm trying to capture everything in the chat so I can send it to Brad.
It should, well, depending upon your Zoom settings, it may or may not download
It
the
doesn't.
chat.
No, it does not.
Get to the other server.
Okay, I captured all the chat, so we should be good there.
Yeah, and I joined both Discord servers, so if anybody
Okay.
needs them, I can get back, we can get back to them. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your help today, Martina.
Yes,
Yeah, of course.
thank you.
No problem.
Have a nice evening.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you.
See you.
Okay.
You too.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Cheers, everyone.